Earth was burning. The once bustling cities lay in ruins, smothered under plumes of black smoke. The Zorathians, a conquering race from beyond the stars, had declared Earth unworthy of negotiation. With their advanced technology and massive war machines, they dismantled humanity's defenses in days. Their towering anti-gravity tanks and energy cannons rendered Earth's most advanced weaponry useless. The resistance had dwindled to fragmented whispers, scattered across the globe. Humanity had been outmatched, outgunned, and brought to its knees. At the heart of this devastation, the Zorathians unveiled their ultimate weapon, the Colossus. This monstrous war machine was their answer to any possible resistance, standing as tall as a skyscraper with an arsenal capable of obliterating entire cities in minutes. Its shimmering energy shields were impenetrable, deflecting all projectiles and neutralizing energy-based weapons. The aliens reveled in their supremacy, broadcasting messages of Earth's inevitable surrender. But not everyone had given up. In a hidden bunker deep beneath a forest, Captain Harris stared at the monitors, his jaw clenched. A veteran of too many battles, Harris had seen his share of despair, but he had no time for defeat. Around him, a mix of engineers and soldiers worked tirelessly. This wasn't just any resistance base. It was a place of innovation, desperation, and hope. And their hope lay in relics of an older war, the M1 Abrams tanks. The Abrams were relics by every modern standard, shelved years ago in favor of drones and energy-based systems. But the Zorathians had overlooked one critical detail. Their shields, designed to repel plasma and lasers, were vulnerable to kinetic force, old-fashioned solid projectiles. Harris's team had stumbled upon this discovery almost by accident, salvaging data from a battle where a chunk of debris had pierced an alien skiff's hull. That knowledge had given birth to a desperate idea: resurrect the Abrams and fight back. The team worked around the clock, stripping, upgrading, and retrofitting the tanks. They installed enhanced targeting systems, reinforced the armor, and fitted the barrels with sabot rounds capable of high-velocity impact. The work wasn't just engineering, it was an act of rebellion. Every piece of welded metal and every recalibrated system was a declaration that humanity would not go quietly. Morale was fragile, but Harris refused to let despair creep in. He gathered his team and the small group of soldiers who would crew the tanks. His voice was firm as he addressed them, standing atop one of the refurbished tanks. "The world out there thinks we're done. They think humanity is finished. But they don't know us. They don't understand what it means to fight for our home. These tanks? They're more than steel and shells. They're a reminder of what we can do when we refuse to quit." The soldiers responded with silent nods, their resolve hardening. They knew what lay ahead, a desperate gambit against impossible odds. The Colossus was approaching their location, and the Zorathians wouldn't stop until every last human stronghold was crushed. Harris and his team would meet them head-on. As the tanks rolled out of the bunker, the air was thick with tension. The night sky was lit by distant fires, and the ground trembled with the approaching footsteps of the Colossus. Every creak of the tank's treads, every hum of the modified engines, carried the weight of Earth's last hope. They didn't know if they could win. But they knew they couldn't afford to lose. The Colossus loomed over the horizon, an unmissable shadow against the flames of a devastated Earth. Each step it took sent tremors through the ground, as if the planet itself recoiled in fear. It was a mechanical giant, its towering frame glinting under the glow of its energy shields. From its arms protruded plasma cannons, capable of leveling cities with a single shot. For the Zorathians, it was more than a weapon, it was a declaration of their superiority. This was their final push to crush the last remnants of resistance. Inside the Colossus, alien commanders watched with smug satisfaction as their forces advanced. They viewed humanity as little more than an inconvenience, a primitive species that had dared to resist. Their communications broadcasted across the airwaves, mocking Earth's obsolete toys and demanding surrender. It wasn't arrogance, it was confidence, born of their overwhelming victories. No one had ever stopped the Colossus. To them, this was already over. Captain Harris and his team weren't listening to the broadcasts. They had no time for alien taunts. The Abrams tanks were already moving into position, concealed beneath the shadows of a forest near a narrow pass. This was the kill zone, chosen carefully to limit the Colossus's maneuverability and amplify the tank's tactical advantage. Every crew member inside the tanks knew what they were about to face. Fear was natural, but they clung to the hope that their plan could work. The Colossus wasn't invincible, not if their calculations were correct. As the Colossus reached the edge of the pass, its energy cannons fired, vaporizing anything in their path. Trees disintegrated, rocks melted, and the air itself seemed to warp under the sheer intensity of the blasts. But the Abrams tanks remained hidden, waiting. The alien forces accompanying the Colossus scouted the area, but their scans were designed to detect energy signatures. The cold, mechanical Abrams didn't emit the kind of signals their sensors were trained to find. They were ghosts on the battlefield, invisible to the enemy. The first Abrams fired. The sabot round tore through the night with a deafening crack, its velocity unmatched by anything the aliens had encountered before. It struck the Colossus squarely in its shield, and for the first time, the shimmering barrier rippled and faltered. The impact sent a shockwave through the alien ranks. They had expected resistance, but not this. Another round followed, then another. Each shot was precise, targeting the weak points in the Colossus's shield system. The Zorathians scrambled to respond, their commanders shouting orders in their guttural language. Plasma cannons swiveled toward the tanks, but the Abrams were already on the move, using the terrain to their advantage. Their crews worked seamlessly, adjusting positions and firing in perfect coordination. Inside the Colossus, the alien commanders were no longer smug. Their superior technology had been breached, and they didn't understand how. They had underestimated these human relics, dismissing them as irrelevant. Now, those relics were dismantling their strongest weapon. The Abrams tanks pressed their advantage, focusing fire on the Colossus's legs. One shot struck a joint, shattering the armor and causing the massive machine to stagger. The ground quaked as the Colossus struggled to maintain its balance. The aliens unleashed a barrage of plasma, obliterating sections of the forest, but the tanks kept moving, their crews navigating with precision. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, and for the first time, the Zorathians were losing. Harris's voice crackled over the radio, calm but commanding. "Stay on target. We take this thing down now, or we don't take it down at all." His team didn't need further motivation. They knew what was at stake. As the Colossus faltered, the alien foot soldiers began to break formation. Panic spread among them as their ultimate weapon showed signs of vulnerability. The Abrams tanks pressed harder, firing relentlessly. Each shot weakened the Colossus further, the once impenetrable shields now flickering with instability. The final shot in this phase came from Harris's own tank. The sabot round struck the Colossus directly in its exposed leg joint, severing it completely. The machine collapsed, one of its massive legs crumpling under its weight. The impact was thunderous, a sound that echoed across the battlefield. Dust and debris filled the air, and for a moment, everything was silent. But the battle wasn't over. The Colossus was down, but not out. Its cannons swiveled, firing wildly in an attempt to regain control. The Abrams crews braced themselves, knowing the fight was far from finished. This was only the beginning of their desperate stand. The Colossus, now wounded and unsteady, unleashed its full fury. Plasma cannons fired indiscriminately, scorching the earth and turning the battlefield into a hellscape of fire and smoke. The ground trembled with every blast, and the sky seemed to pulse with each discharge of energy. The Abrams tanks, though outmatched in sheer firepower, moved with precision, their crews staying focused despite the chaos. They were fighting not just for survival but for the chance to prove humanity's resilience. The tanks used the terrain to their advantage, darting in and out of cover, their sabot rounds striking with precision. Each hit further destabilized the Colossus. Its shields, now flickering and weak, offered little protection. One well-placed shot tore through its shoulder joint, causing one of its plasma cannons to collapse uselessly to its side. Yet the machine continued to fight, its remaining weapons firing relentlessly as alien commanders inside it worked frantically to regain control. Harris and his crew pushed their tank to the limit, coordinating with the other Abrams in a daring maneuver. Using the terrain, they lured the Colossus deeper into the narrow pass, forcing it into a confined space where its massive size became a liability. The towering machine struggled to maneuver, its legs grinding against the rock walls. With each misstep, it exposed more vulnerabilities. Alien reinforcements arrived, swarming the battlefield with smaller skiffs and infantry units. These soldiers, armed with energy rifles, moved to flank the tanks. The Abrams crews adapted quickly. Machine guns mounted on the tanks came to life, mowing down alien troops with brutal efficiency. The humans on the ground weren't just fighting the Colossus, they were fighting the entirety of Zorathian forces in the area. Yet they held their ground, their determination unshaken. The battle reached a fever pitch as the Colossus attempted to turn its massive frame to bring its primary cannon to bear on the tanks. Harris saw the move coming and acted immediately, calling for a coordinated strike. 3 tanks fired simultaneously, their rounds striking the Colossus's exposed torso. The impact was devastating, and the towering machine staggered once more. Sparks and smoke erupted from its damaged core, and the alien commanders inside it screamed in frustration. But the Colossus wasn't done yet. In a final act of desperation, it unleashed a concentrated plasma blast aimed directly at the largest cluster of tanks. The blast tore through the ground, sending debris flying and narrowly missing one of the Abrams. The shockwave knocked over a smaller skiff, crushing the alien soldiers inside. The battlefield was chaos, but the humans pressed on. Harris's voice came over the radio again, steady and determined. "This is it. We take the shot now, or we lose everything." His tank, along with 2 others, moved into position. They aimed for the Colossus's core, the glowing reactor exposed beneath its damaged armor. Every Abrams on the field held its fire for a brief moment, waiting for the perfect shot. The first sabot round hit, followed by another, and then a third. The combined force of the impacts shattered the reactor casing. For a brief second, there was silence. Then, the Colossus erupted in a massive explosion, a fiery shockwave consuming everything in its immediate vicinity. The towering machine collapsed in on itself, its once imposing frame reduced to smoldering wreckage. The alien forces, seeing their ultimate weapon destroyed, hesitated. Their formation broke, and panic spread like wildfire. Some attempted to regroup, but without the Colossus, their morale was shattered. The humans seized the opportunity, driving the alien soldiers into a full retreat. The Abrams tanks continued their advance, ensuring that no reinforcements could regroup. As the dust settled, the battlefield fell eerily quiet. The Colossus, once the symbol of Zorathian invincibility, was nothing more than a pile of twisted metal and smoking debris. The Abrams tanks, battered but still functional, stood as silent sentinels amidst the carnage. They had done what no one thought possible. Against all odds, they had taken down the enemy's greatest weapon. Harris emerged from his tank, looking over the destruction. His face, streaked with soot and sweat, was resolute. This wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Humanity wasn't beaten. Not yet. And now, the fight for Earth had truly begun. The battlefield lay quiet, the remains of the Colossus smoldering as dawn broke over the horizon. The towering machine that had symbolized the Zorathians' domination was now a shattered husk, its energy cannons twisted and lifeless. The victory was undeniable, but it came with a cost. The Abrams tanks, though still operational, bore the scars of battle, dented armor, scorched plating, and exhausted crews. Yet amidst the destruction, the unshakable resolve of humanity stood tall. The Zorathian forces, now leaderless and demoralized, began their retreat. Without the Colossus to anchor their advance, their coordinated assault fell apart. Some alien skiffs attempted to regroup, only to be picked off by precision fire from the remaining tanks. Others fled the battlefield entirely, abandoning their comrades in the face of unrelenting resistance. For the first time since the invasion began, the Zorathians tasted defeat. Their airwaves, once filled with declarations of supremacy, now buzzed with chaotic orders and panicked retreats. For the humans, the victory wasn't just tactical, it was symbolic. The Abrams tanks, dismissed as relics of a bygone era, had done the impossible. They had taken on the invincible and won. What had started as a desperate gamble had become a rallying cry. Word of the Colossus's destruction spread quickly, carried by scattered resistance networks across the globe. In underground bunkers and hidden strongholds, people dared to hope. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was fighting back. Harris, standing atop his tank, addressed his crew and the soldiers around him. His voice, though hoarse from hours of shouting commands, carried a new weight. "This isn't the end," he said, his eyes scanning the battered faces of his team. "It's the beginning. We've shown them what we can do. They thought we were finished. They thought they'd broken us. But today, we proved them wrong." The victory wasn't without its challenges ahead. The destruction of the Colossus had bought humanity time, but the Zorathians still had their fleets, their technology, and their numbers. The fight was far from over. Harris knew this. His team knew it. But they also knew something the aliens didn't. Humans were at their most dangerous when pushed to the edge. Efforts to salvage the battlefield began almost immediately. Engineers swarmed over the remains of the Colossus, prying apart its shattered armor and pulling out alien technology. Every piece of machinery, every fragment of data, was a potential weapon in the hands of the Resistance. The Zorathians had underestimated Earth's ability to adapt and learn. Now, their own technology would be turned against them. The Abrams tanks, though celebrated as heroes of the battle, weren't invincible. Mechanics worked tirelessly to repair the damage they had sustained, scavenging parts from wrecked vehicles and alien debris. Crews swapped stories of the fight, their camaraderie growing stronger with each retelling. The tanks had become more than machines. They were symbols of defiance, rolling proof that humanity could stand against even the most advanced enemies. Around the globe, Resistance leaders seized on the moment. Footage of the Colossus's destruction spread like wildfire, inspiring uprisings in occupied territories. Civilians, emboldened by the victory, began sabotaging Zorathian supply lines and aiding underground militias. The aliens, once secure in their control, now faced unrest on multiple fronts. The tide was beginning to turn. Inside the Zorathian command ships orbiting Earth, the loss of the Colossus sent shockwaves through their ranks. Their invincible war machine, their ultimate symbol of power, had been destroyed by what they had dismissed as primitive relics. It was more than a tactical loss, it was a blow to their psyche. For the first time, they faced the possibility that Earth might not be as easily subdued as they had thought. The Zorathian commanders debated their next move. Some argued for an immediate retaliatory strike to crush the Resistance before it could gain momentum. Others cautioned against underestimating humanity again, suggesting a more calculated approach. But one thing was clear: the humans had proven they were more resourceful and resilient than expected. The aliens couldn't afford another mistake. On the ground, Harris and his team prepared for what was to come. The victory had given them breathing room, but the fight was far from over. Supplies were scarce, and their numbers were limited. Yet the spirit of the Resistance had been reignited. For every Abrams tank that rolled onto the battlefield, 100 more fighters stood ready to join the cause. The final moments of the battle had left a mark not just on the battlefield but on the hearts of those who witnessed it. Humanity had faced extinction and responded with defiance. They had turned relics of their past into weapons of their future. And they had proven that no matter how advanced their enemies were, humanity's ingenuity, determination, and will to survive were unmatched. As the sun rose over the battlefield, casting its light on the smoldering wreckage of the Colossus, Harris allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. This was more than a victory, it was a statement. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. It was fighting for its future. And no matter how many colossi the Zorathians sent, humanity would rise to meet them. Because that's what humans did: they adapted, they endured, and they overcame.